Afternoon, everybody. It is Sunday afternoon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for Multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by Post-Gazette sports columnist Paul Zeise to react to what I think is a pretty huge Steelers victory today, Paul, 28-27 against the Commanders. Pulled it out late on both sides of the ball. You get the touchdown, but you still left 2:30 left. I was sitting there thinking, maybe Mike Williams scores that touchdown a little too early, leaves too much time for Jayden Daniels, one of the hottest quarterbacks in football. The defense goes out, gets the stop they need, albeit by a few inches, tackling Zach Ertz just a little bit short of that line to gain on that final drive for the Commanders. We're going to get into it here, Paul, in a second. But I was writing my notes, kind of writing them as if they were going to lose the game, and pretty much from that point forward, clutch plays on both sides of the ball. I was kind of saying, listen, given that the Commanders are one of the hottest teams in football, you lose this game. I think you showed some good things today. I don't think it would have been a horrific loss, but by contrast, it feels like a huge win because of being able to pull it out like that.
Well, it was a huge win for them. Obviously, getting a win on the road against a team with a winning record. I thought that they did a lot of good things in this game. But really, the difference between them and Washington is they know how to win games, and Washington still is learning how to win games. There were so many plays that Washington had. This game should have been over in the middle of the third quarter. I mean, Jayden Daniels is as good as he is. He missed some really easy, big throws. Even from his own end zone, he has a chance to make a 35-yard throw, and he just misses it by a mile. I felt like, and at the end of the game, I thought Washington there, they panicked a little bit. And then, of course, I would say there's zero chance Russell Wilson is snapping the ball there. So I'm not sure why you're jumping off, like trying to make a play there. And there's zero chance that Russell Wilson is going to snap the ball there. But all of it adds up, like I said, to a team in Washington with a new coach. They're trying to learn how to win games like this. And this was a game that really they outplayed the Steelers. They should have won the game, and they didn't, because the Steelers make plays when it's time to make plays. So, all of this stuff that we talk about when it comes to throwing the ball, down the field and the points that Washington scores and all that stuff, I get it. But you know what the Steelers have taught anybody that has paid attention for the last, however long it's been since, before, when Ben Roethlisberger was really cooking and everything else, that was different. But the last 4 or 5 years, the Steelers have been a team that's just been resourceful to find a way to win games. And Washington needs to figure that out. That's the next thing for Washington. It's clear they've got some talent. It's clear that they're pretty good, but you know what? When some critical points in the game, they just didn't play. They just didn't make plays that were there to be made.
Paul, I want to get into Russell Wilson, the game that he had, the game the offensive line had, the game the defense had. I think there's so much to talk about in this game. Before we do, just want to thank our primary sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Paul, I think we can start with Russ. I'm seeing kind of a trend emerging here with him where the accuracy can be lacking at times. There can be lapses with the connections with the receivers, but he's hitting the passes he needs to win football games. Rolling down the box score here, you had a long of 34 to Pickens. You had a long of 32 to Mike Williams for the touchdown and his only catch of the game. Long of 26 to Jaylen Warren. Long of 13 to Calvin Austin. All four of those guys averaged over 10 yards a catch. Warren, Williams, and Pickens average over 14.5. So listen, I don't know if this is the best version of Russell Wilson that we're seeing yet, but he's taking his shots and he's hitting on enough of them that it's been enough for the Steelers against now, not just the Giants and the Jets, but the Commanders as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's changed the Steelers clearly. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Obviously, Justin Fields, I don't know if Justin Fields wins this game today. I think he wins the last 2 games because the Giants and the Jets stink. I don't think he scores 28 points today against Washington. I think there were some plays there that Russell Wilson made that Justin Fields cannot make or does not make. So he's changed them. I think what you saw today is what you're going to get from Russell Wilson. I don't know that he's going to ever be that guy who's like who 5-6 years ago where he was playing at a Hall of Fame level all the time. But what you see from him is when he dials it back and throws a little bit, it is just basically he's still really, really good. He's still really, really good at throwing the deep ball. He's still really accurate at times. I mean, he's just, a little bit older than he used to be. That's all. And so when you get a little older than you used to be, some of the plays that you make, maybe that you used to be able to make, you can't. But I don't think there's any question at all, at least not in my mind. There's no question that he has completely changed this team and given them the opportunity to come from behind and win a game like this. They were down, 10 at one point, and they got down 10. He brings them right down the field and they score a touchdown, right? Washington, again, they're going to watch the film of this game and they're going to kick themselves in several times. Because they should have been up by more than 6 points late, and they weren't. And that's how the Steelers have had that happen to them in the past, where they play, and they couldn't score, or couldn't get over the top, or couldn't get that extra 3 points or 7 points to put them out of reach. It's one of those things where when you've got Russell Wilson, and how many times we've not said this about the Steelers in a long time. But if you have a guy like Russell Wilson and they let you hang around, there's a good chance he might beat you.
Yeah. And I think, we've seen it at times with the Steelers the last couple of years. You think of those couple games with Kenny Pickett at the end of, 22, where you're playing the Raiders and Ravens in back-to-back weeks. You get huge wins to stay in that playoff race, but you didn't see it consistently. And seeing Russell Wilson do it against a good team today is I think, an example of, why Mike Tomlin believed in Russell Wilson when a lot of people, I'll put myself on that list, said, a guy like Justin Fields is the future. I think what you're seeing from Russell Wilson is that he has the ability to probably play a few more years in this league. And no, he's not going to be that all-pro type of guy, but he can do that stuff that Ben Roethlisberger did at the end of his career, where he knows where the ball has to go. Right. And I think that's something that the Steelers have lacked and maybe we took for granted for a long time. But just the way quarterbacks are developed these days, the fact that he knows where the ball needs to go in those moments, I think is a huge advantage for the Steelers as they go into a huge divisional stretch next week.
Yeah. I mean, again, as we've said, when you get into the playoffs, one of the things that happens with the Steelers is if you get in the playoffs and you fall behind a little bit, you're playing good teams. And so you have to have an offense that's capable of coming back, and I don't know that they have the last few years. But this team looks to me like a team that's capable of winning a shootout if they need to. Really. They look to me like a team that if it goes up and down, and the next thing you know, it's a game like this, to a lesser extent, that they could score 31 points if they have to win. And I'll give you, as an aside, a better example too of what I was just talking about, where the Steelers know how to win, and Washington is a young. They got some young players, and it's a new team, and they haven't had a lot of success over the last few, and they're learning how to win. I don't know if you saw, somehow Kansas City found a way to win again, so they're undefeated in a game they had no business winning. If you really watched how it played out and everything else. But somehow, some way, they're lining up to kick a game-winning field goal because they just know how to win games. And I think that you bring a guy like Russell Wilson into the mix. Mike Tomlin has been a guy who his entire, existence has been winning regular season games. And so you bring a guy like Russell Wilson into the mix who knows how to win. And to me, now all of a sudden, when you get into games, if the score goes one way, it's just basically, in my mind, now you've got Russell Wilson that gives you a chance to bring you back to win the game.
Yeah, and I think the most encouraging thing, Paul, is that offensively, this was not a perfect, effort by them. It was stagnant at times. They had several 3-and-outs, drives that fizzled, and you still find a way to not only win this game, but you look at this team. And I still say there's some upside there if you can get on this same page with your receivers a little better, in Russell Wilson's case. Because remember, he lost most of training camp. He lost the first several weeks of the season. This is really only his third game, other than that preseason game that he was in for like a drive. So, I think there's still upside with this group as he gets more familiar with his receivers. They get more familiar with him. I think that's the encouraging thing. Speaking of receivers, Mike Williams, I think, is a huge story. Steelers go out and get him in the middle of the week at the trade deadline. Didn't play a ton. He only had the one target the entire game, but that one target was the 32-yard touchdown. Paul, I don't think we're going to declare him wide receiver 2 or a great wide receiver 2 this week, but is he looking, with his ability to make a play like that, like the type of guy that they needed to add, at least in terms of depth, so they have more guys, even if none of them are particularly great, that can threaten opposing defenses?
Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? They bring him in and basically – he might not have even been in the game if was it Calvin Austin got hurt the play before, got banged up, or a couple plays before Calvin Austin got banged up. He might not have even been in the game to make that play. But listen, that's why they brought him, right? That's the one thing we know that Mike Williams can do is run down the field and catch the ball for go routes. That's what they asked him to do. And Washington, I don't know what they were doing in coverage, but at the end of the day, the one thing that we knew that he could do and could add to the offense, he did. And so now they just have to build on it a little bit at a time. That's the biggest thing. I'll tell you, there was another sequence that shows the difference between Russell Wilson. I think it might have been on the game-winning drive, or maybe it was actually the drive where Jaylen Warren fumbled it at the goal line. But they had a 3rd and 15, and Russell Wilson throws a dime, on that drive. It was like a 3rd and 15 or something like that, and throws a dime down the field, and George Pickens makes a nice play on it and everything. Those are the kind of plays that have been really absent from this offense for the last 4 or 5 years. But when you got a guy like him, you're happy to do it.
Yeah. Paul, I also wanted to ask you about the running game. I think it was kind of a mixed verdict today. Najee Harris struggled, 21 carries, 53 yards. That's an average of 2.5 per carry. Did get the one touchdown. But Jaylen Warren, kind of had his first effort of the season where we said, there's the guy that we remember who runs hard and makes life difficult for opposing defenses. He gets 66 yards on 14 carries. It's an average of 4.7, really spelled Najee Harris late when Najee was taken out of the game. Important for this team, Paul, to get Jaylen Warren rolling a little bit and building some confidence that he is, fully back from this injury and a guy that they can count on a day when maybe defenses are getting a little bit of a read on Najee.
Well, I think that's the key with him is he's a sort of a change of speed and change of direction guy, isn't he? I mean, he's a change of direction from what they do when they've got Najee Harris. I think he's better at pass blocking a little bit than Najee Harris. And the bottom line is when you put him in and they hand it off, he just comes off of the handoff at a different speed. He runs downhill hard. I know there are some people that probably, are nervous about the fact that he fumbled because he had a little fumbling issue his first year. But listen, that play on the goal line, you got to just give credit to Washington. They just made a good play that's a fumble that many running backs might have coughed it up the way it was. They attacked the football and they made a play. Sometimes you make plays, the other team make plays. I think that was the biggest thing to me is, you think about it that way. If the other team makes a play from time to time, you just got to give them credit. And so that's one of those ones where I just would tell you that I don't think that should be held against him, or that people should, or that people should say, well, he's fumbled it. I don't know. Because to me, that was just the defense making a play. I think you have Warren. It gives you a change of pace. And on a day like today when Najee Harris isn't necessarily have it or whatever, now all of a sudden you got another guy you can hit it off to.
Paul wanted to ask about George Pickens. What more can you say about the guy? I think what we're finally seeing from him is the consistency, doing it week in, week out. We've seen the ability, right? And there's never really been a doubt that he's had the talent to do big things. But now it just seems like week after week, he is proving himself to be the number one that people kind of declared him to be, I think, before we saw him do it as routinely. But this feels like a big development that every week he seems to be bringing it now, and he's got a veteran quarterback to get him the ball, and that just seems to unlock him even a little bit more.
I think that's the last point you made there is what really is the punchline. He finally has a quarterback that can actually throw him the ball, period. He can actually get him the ball on time, down the field. He can actually throw him the ball. And I think that's the biggest thing. When you have it's amazing how you can unlock a receiver when you have a really good quarterback, right? It's amazing how that works. And so I feel like, Pickens is obviously coming into his own a little bit, of course, and he seems like he's maturing and he's becoming more consistent. But again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that now he has a quarterback that knows how to get him the ball.
Paul, any other thoughts on the offense? I think the offensive line is probably the big area that we haven't touched on yet. They end up yielding 3 sacks of Russell Wilson, but I think it went a little bit beyond that, Paul. There were a lot of plays that Russ got rid of the ball that he was, really didn't have a chance. There were several key penalties from this group, not the effort I think you wanted to see from them out of the bye, even though you still get the victory.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think they played well. Gave up too many almost jailbreak type things at Russell Wilson. A couple times he was able to overcome it by, dumping the ball off. A couple times he wasn't. Gave up a few sacks. There were times when they, had a little bit of a leak when they were trying to run the football. I wasn't really all that impressed. I'm still trying to figure out what they have in Broderick Jones. But I don't know. That's something that we just keep watching to see what happens and see if they can figure it out, eventually figure out what exactly it is that they need to do to get better.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this from the start. It's a young offensive line. It's now an injured offensive line. I think asking consistency from them is going to be a lot the rest of the way, but you make enough plays to win the game. So definitely some things to clean up. If I have a big complaint about the offense, that's probably it for the day. Paul, let's get into the defense and special teams because it was a very busy day on those fronts. Before we do, just want to thank a couple more sponsors. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. Also want to thank Archie's on the South Side. The game is always on at Archie's on Carson, Pittsburgh's best place for food, drinks, and sports. Open Sundays for the game, 12 p.m. to 2 a.m. Be sure to check out the daily drink specials and stop in for 80-cent wing nights Monday through Thursday. Tell them Paul Zeise sent you with the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. I believe you'll be down there tomorrow, right, Paul?
Yeah, I'm always down there on Mondays. So, yep, I'll be down there. If you want to come down, join us. And for 80-cent wings, we'll have a good time. You can eat my sandwich and we watch a little Monday Night Football.
Yes, and just a reminder, if you haven't already, because we get obviously the huge audiences for these Steelers games. If you like hearing Paul, you'll be able to hear him every day on our new daily live show, usually around 5 p.m. Sometimes we move it around a little bit, but generally around 5 p.m. is when you can find Paul for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, get his takes on the day in Pittsburgh sports. So make sure, if you haven't already, sign up for the channel. You'll get plenty of alerts for all that. Paul, let's get into the defense. Look, I mean, that last drive of the first drive of the second half, they got pushed around. They got thrown on. It was not pretty. You give them credit, I think, for buckling up pretty much from that point forward. But listen, they're still getting gashed in ways that I don't think we're used to seeing from a Steelers defense. And there's times where, when the pass rush is getting home, you say these guys look dominant. And then it's 3-4 plays on a drive and boom, a lot of that good gets undone. What's your read on this unit before we get into some specific individuals?
Well, I think that the defense, again, they've been clutch. They've made plays when they've needed to make plays. They've shut down teams when they've needed to shut them down, but they have not been elite the last few weeks for sure. I mean, they're just one of those things where they're giving up too many plays, giving up too many big plays. And I go back to this. If Jayden Daniels was just a little bit more accurate today, this is a different game altogether. There were plays all over the field to be made. So, the defense did what they had to do at the end of the game to win, but they can't feel good about how they played, and they can't feel good about how they defended Washington. I think Washington, and the other part of it, how many passes did Washington drop? That especially the two drives that led to field goals. They should have probably scored touchdowns on both of those drives. There's a number of plays that they just did not make. And some of that goes back to, the Steelers, maybe kind of making a play, and other times it was then I just thought there were a lot of plays out there to be made if Washington was just a little bit more accurate throwing the ball. They'd probably make a number of plays. One of the biggest plays I thought in the game was in that last drive when Washington had the ball on first down. Was it Keanu Benton that somehow peeled off and stopped Jayden Daniels? Yeah. It was a quarterback draw. If he doesn't do that, Jayden Daniels probably runs for 10, 15 yards, and now we're talking about them being basically right in field goal range. That was a huge play for them. So little plays like that probably were the difference between winning and losing, but they can't continue to get gashed the way they do at times.
I wanted to ask about Joey Porter. Not a great day for him. Multiple penalties. Just got flat out cooked by Terry McLaurin a few times. I think he's had some nice games, but I also think that the teams are starting to understand that even if they've got guys who are covered by Joey Porter Jr., that challenge him, make him make plays, and sometimes you're going to get a penalty. It seems like the books is somewhat out on him a little bit, Paul, and that he's going to have to adjust to kind of get back to where he was last season, where you're starting to talk about him as a true shutdown number one corner.
Well, he certainly did not have a good day, Adam. I think Joey Porter Jr. would tell you he didn't have a good day. The one call on him was a little bit ticky-tack, I think, but for the most part, they were good calls and legitimate calls. He's got to learn how to play without his hands. He's got to learn how to play without being so physical all the time because he's going to get called. And I also think, Terry McLaurin's also a really, really good player. So there's that, and that's a part of the discussion as well. But to me, I look at him and I just say basically it's got to be in so many ways the kind of game where now they go back and they sort of work with his technique and figure out what he's doing so that he can sort of get out of the habit of using his hands so much.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you were willing to live with before, but it just seems like teams are attacking him differently and saying, yeah, go make a play. And so now I think that it is incumbent upon him to make that adjustment. So it'll be interesting to see how things go with him. Someone I did think played well, Paul, and these two kind of dovetail with each other. Patrick Queen seemed to be everywhere. He's making plays in the backfield, ends up leading the team in tackles with 6 solos, 7 combined, ends up with 2 TFLs, the pass defended. Kind of a big day for him, Paul. And you know what? I'm going to say this because I noticed Patrick Queen and I continue not to notice Minkah Fitzpatrick. And how do you look at how those two are kind of working together in this defense? Is that a fair assessment of it, or am I maybe being unfair to Minkah a little bit?
Well, I didn't think Minkah played. He was invisible for a lot of this game. But I thought that Patrick Queen was really good. I thought he made a lot of plays for the Steelers. I think he made some really good tackles, a couple open field tackles. I think he used his speed to limit some plays for Washington. I thought he played well, really, really from the start of the game. Minkah Fitzpatrick made a couple plays late. And again, it goes back to my theme, which is, what's that thing, the NFL films, the great teams aren't always great. They're just great when they need to be. I mean, that's sort of the Steelers' MO today was they weren't great, but when they needed to be great, they were. And Minkah is a guy who showed up and made 2 or 3 plays late that changed the game. But for the most part, same thing with TJ Watt. I mean, for long stretches of the game, we didn't even know he was playing. And then when it came down to it and they needed him to make a play, well, what did he do? He went and made a play. So I think that's always the key when you have, big-time players. You need them to make plays whenever it's time to go win the game.
Paul, Alex Highsmith went down. It did not look good. We'll continue to monitor that. But as we're recording here, live after the game, I don't think we have a whole lot of insight into that situation. So, Paul, what's your read on where this defense goes if they have to be without Alex Highsmith? Because seriously, I mean, that looks like best case scenario. It might be like a high ankle sprain situation where it looked like a multiple week type of thing to me.
That probably will be at least a game or two off for sure. I mean, that's really what I would tell you. It's at least a game or two where he's probably going to be out. That's a tough, especially if it's a high ankle sprain, Adam. You know how that works. If it's a high ankle sprain, then it becomes a problem. So to me, but the thing is, they went out and got Preston Smith. How smart was that, right? I mean, you go out and get a guy to fill in for him. And you hope that, by the time that the playoffs roll around, you've got Highsmith and Herbig and Smith and Watt. And now you got a full stable of guys that are outside rushers.
Eventful night on special teams, Paul. They go out and, recover that one fumble to set up the one touchdown on the punt, but they also pulled the fake punt. Man, have you ever I don't know that I completely hate the call, but I don't think I've ever seen anything more out of character for the Steelers to try to pull. Maybe that's why they did it. Maybe, the Commanders never in a million years would have imagined that they would attempt that on, 4th and long deep inside their own territory. But, man, that was one of the most unexpected things I've seen from the Steelers in some time. What was your read on that decision?
Well, I didn't like it, and I'll tell you why I didn't like it, because I didn't think they needed to do it. But it was so wide open, you got to make a play there. I mean, you just got to make a play. The thing about it is, I felt like they had the game pretty much going the way they wanted to go. It was under control. Their defense was under control. Their offense was, had moved the ball or whatever. To me, the risk was exactly what happened. You don't make that play. And let me be very clear. Yeah, it's a play that you're supposed to make it, but correct me. Was it Miles Killebrew that threw it?
Miles Killebrew throwing to James Pierre. So exactly. I don't know. It's not like it's Russ throwing to George Pickens.
Exactly. How many times do you think Miles Killebrew throws it to James Pierre in a game? Probably the first time it's ever happened. So you've got to, whenever you say, well, it was wide open. Okay. But again, it wasn't George Pickens. It wasn't Russell Wilson. It wasn't, okay, this is an easy throw and catch. It was a guy who doesn't throw it and a guy who doesn't catch it. So you have to take that into your part of your equation of, are we going to do this? And again, as soon as it didn't work, the game completely changed and went in Washington's favor. Now all of a sudden they get an easy touchdown. Next thing you know, they're off and running and, everything else. And quite frankly, the Steelers, then the Steelers got it back when the Washington's kick returner or punt returner lets it bounce off his mask first and bounces in the air and the Steelers get it. I'm just saying, to me, risk reward. And this is why any of these people who are always talking about, oh, it's second guessing and this and that. Adam, I never second guess. I have a thought about what I would do before the play starts, no matter what. And my thought there was risk reward. It didn't add up for me. It just didn't. It'd be one thing if, you had a chance to maybe go, score a touchdown or do something like that. You still would have probably been about 60 yards away from the end zone, even if you make it work. To me, your offense is in control. Your defense is in control. Punt the football, who's, by the way, their punter is one of your best players. You're not putting the ball in Miles Killebrew's hands and asking him to make a throw to James Pierre. I just think that, to me, the risk reward was not there, whether it made it or not.
Yeah, I tend to agree. But yeah, it was just, man, it's not a risk you usually see Mike Tomlin taking. I think that was probably a big part of the calculation. Paul, I also wanted to talk about the AFC North division race because we're in the rare position, a little bit at 5 p.m. here on the East Coast on a Sunday. I think the whole division is done for the week after that Ravens-Bengals game on Thursday night. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase throw it all over the yard on Baltimore, but Baltimore still comes back and wins. What's your read on both of those teams, Paul? Is Is Baltimore not the team that I think we've built them up to be, but still, very good and very much a threat to the Steelers? Or do you look at a game like they won the other night and say, man, if that's how they play when they don't have their game on defense, then they are going to be a real problem the rest of the way?
No, I mean, I think Baltimore is exactly who we thought they were, right? And I would expect next week's game to be similar to this game, where both teams are going to have some success on offense. The Steelers should be able to move the ball against Baltimore. They should be able to score against Baltimore. They should be able to throw the ball down the field against Baltimore. Baltimore's defense isn't very good, and they're banged up, too, on top of it. But I expect Lamar Jackson and company to make plays as well. So what to me, what we're looking at, in my mind at least, is this fact. By adding Russell Wilson, you're more equipped to win a game against Baltimore if Lamar Jackson goes crazy, which he really hasn't done that against the Steelers. But let's say next week he plays like he's played so far this year, and he goes crazy, and he, puts up a bunch of yards and points and everything else. The Steelers are equipped to win that kind of game now. We're used to the Baltimore Steeler games being 16-13 slobber knockers or whatever. I don't think that's going to be the case next week. I think the Steelers are equipped to go win that game because they've got Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and I think that's a relevant point, not just for the Ravens, but also for, you got 2 games left against the Bengals, and you've seen Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase kind of start getting this connection cooking. And look, I mean, I don't know if the rest of the team is phenomenal. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs, but if they play like that against the Steelers, I think there's plenty of times in the last couple of years where you'd say the Steelers are toast. And I agree with you, Paul, that they would still have an ability to kind of counter that with what they've got going offensively right now. Any final thoughts, Paul, in the week before we sign off? And I know you'll be back tomorrow. So anything you want to possibly tease for your live show?
No, I think we're going to, a day after probably, break this down a little bit to try and see, what happened in this game. Like I said, what were your thoughts on Jayden Daniels today, Adam? Let me just get your thoughts on that, because here's what I see. I see an enormously talented guy, but I don't know that he's accurate enough to get them where they need to go unless he's going to get better at being able to throw it on time.
Well, you made that point earlier too, Paul. Just to put some stats on it, 17 out of 34, 202 yards, takes the 3 sacks, 68.5 passer rating. That's not very good. So I think you look at those numbers and say the Steelers did a pretty good job. You and I are talking about the big plays they gave up and how they contributed to the game being as close as it was. I think you make a valid point too of, they did a pretty good job to kind of, stymie him in his first real, I think, test. And maybe he's a little bit further from being, an all-pro type of guy than, some people had gotten prepared to declare him at midseason.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I was trying to really look at it, and I felt like having watched him a couple times, he's still got a ways to go to develop into a really. I mean, he's a dynamic talent. There's no question. But I wonder about his accuracy, and I also, I thought they dropped a bunch of passes too, but I thought his accuracy made me wonder if, let's not forget, this is a team that was basically a Hail Mary away from losing to the Bears. This is a team that had to grind out 2 wins against the Giants. So, although, and I said it, I think, you were off this week, but one of the things I said all week, Adam, is that Washington is impressive if you look at their record only at 7-2, but when you break it down week by week, they're a lot less impressive. And that's kind of what I meant. So my point is it's a really good win for the Steelers, but I worry about the Redskins. I worry about the Commanders going forward. I really do. I think that they've got a dynamic offense in some ways, but I also think that they've got a lot of things to learn about how to win a football game against a good team.
Yeah. I think this would have been a good loss for the Steelers, but it's an even bigger win, going into, divisional play. Because, we talk about this math every week, Paul, of, what's it going to take to win the AFC North. Baltimore has a similarly difficult schedule, kind of going down the stretch, if not a little more difficult. Now you got 7. You're at 7. Maybe you only need 3 or 4 more to win this division, Paul. So this was enormous in that sense, too. Excited to continue breaking it down for the rest of the week and get you ready for this huge a rivalry game next week against the Ravens. So if you're just joining us for the first time, please hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. And then you'll get everything we have coming your way. Christopher Carter on the North Shore Drive on Monday will be breaking things down. Ray Fittipaldo and Jerry Dulac are in Washington. They will have their post-game video, so make sure you're subscribed for that. And as we mentioned before, Paul will be back 5 p.m. tomorrow for his live show. If you enjoyed this video, like it, help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. And we'll talk to you again next week.
All right. We'll see you. Thank you.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.